Hello, Planet Earth. Welcome to my YouTube channel. We're at IDK, my BFF Jill 730.
My BFF Jill 730.
I'm Preston L. Young, wishing you warm salutations and congratulations, as always, you've made your way to the Buffington Post. Today I'll be taking a break from Buffy because it's time to review Season 1 of SyFy's The Magicians. A couple of months ago, I posted my Buffyverse TV recommendation for The Magicians, saying that, hey, if you're a sci-fi or fantasy nerd, you should totally check it out because it's a show about you. And one of my subscribers, Wednesday Churchill on the YouTubes, Miss Brandy, she was so excited that I was so excited about the show, and she was like, yes, love the show, yada yada yada, and we were actually live tweeting about it during the finale, and just want to say thank you, Brandy. I really appreciate that somebody else in this world is watching The Magicians. Now, Season 2 has already been confirmed, so yay, but it won't be here until 2017, so womp womp. But at least we know we're getting one, and I'm really excited for that just because Season 1 was really good. Now, before I get into it, just to let you know, this video is going to be split into two parts because I tried to record this already, and my fancy new YouTube restrictions are limiting my videos to only 15 minutes, so I'm going to take this part to talk about the season as a whole, what worked, what didn't work, what I liked, and just general thoughts on it, and then I will get into the individual characters in part 2, so make sure you tune into part 2, the link's in the description below. And so, without further ado, let's jump into the Buffington Post review for SyFy's The Magicians Season 1. Here we go. So my first point of conversation is that what I admire about Season 1 of The Magicians is that it doesn't treat magic as a metaphor for any one aspect of life. It's very much just an allegory for life in general, and free will and choice and consequences that come with all of that. And the reason that's really important is because, yes, there are these elements of Hogwarts and Narnia, and it references those within the text of the show, but the interesting thing is that Narnia and Hogwarts, it's children, and they are children learning about magic, whereas the idea of free will and consequences and choices to all of these actions with magic makes a lot more sense for this show because it does deal with adults instead of children, and the kind of big question marks around everything are that much bigger because we are looking at some 20-somethings who are entering into adulthood and, for all intents and purposes, have already entered into adulthood and have kind of decided on what their lives are going to be, and then magic comes in and kind of throws everything off for a lot of our characters. And the fact that they are in their 20s is the punchline. These questions and these answers and the kind of lack of answers and just the consequences of everything relate to struggles that people in their 20s are often going through. And since the magic is just kind of an overall allegory for life due to the choices and such, the show's not overly concerned with the mythology of magic. We get a little bit of it in the season finale when we find out that Fillory actually kind of gave birth to magic and the gods and like all of reality, I guess, but for the most part, like I said, it's not overly concerned with explaining away magic and where it comes from, and that's actually really freeing. When you have a set mythology and set rules to how and why magic works, it can really encumber the show or the property or whatever it is that you're trying, whatever story it is that you're trying to tell. Like, I've got this entire playlist about the Buffyverse nitpicks and continuity issues because the Buffyverse has these very kind of straightforward rules to its reality, and when you have to keep up with those rules, things can often just get murky, and you can point and say that doesn't fit, like we have to play by the rules. And so not knowing the rules per se, or they're not necessarily being rules for Magic at all, just kind of coming down to free will and your personal choice, it really frees up the show to just stretch out and let us enjoy it. The physicality of Magic is really interesting as well, because it's not just about learning spells and saying them and pointing a wand. There's this interesting, neat physicality to it, the finger tutting and whatnot. It's indicative of a lot of study going into this practice, and the idea that you would have to study and hone and practice these skills often, and just have a certain level of dexterity, and that your hands are literally like making the world around you. It makes it very human in a way, and so I like that there is this really physical element that you can see, and that the actors are having to get across to you, not just through facial expression or through line delivery, but through actual motion, which is really neat, and it's something that I don't think I've seen done quite this way before. I also really like the idea that Magic doesn't necessarily have a purpose or rules, but it does have limits. The episode that really kind of stopped me and made me say, oh, this show is doing something very, very neat here is the cancer puppy episode, where Quentin finds out that his father's dying of brain cancer, and he goes about trying to fix it, but it's something that just can't be fixed. It's also implied that maybe cancer itself is a kind of magic that we just kind of forgot about. The kind of real-world limitations on magic, in that you can't use it to fix everything, but you can use it to fix the things you can. It was one of those moments that made me say, this show actually has a heart, and they're doing something with this magic. That touching scene between Quentin and his father when he's fixing this airplane, it really struck me, and it made me go, oh, okay, I see what they're really aiming for here. And the idea of, magic and these consequences to your choices and actions, it really comes full circle when we get to who Brandy and I are calling Jasmine, the lady underground crazy fox god that dupes true believers. Yeah. This idea of a bell that can't be unrung is really interesting for really the whole season. This notion of Julia, who has been grasping at straws all season, and she finally puts all of her eggs in this basket because she went from seeing magic one way and now she's seeing it in another, and not really trying to understand the finer points of it, the kind of in between. She does kind of go full throttle into this crazy God situation, and it ends up biting her in the ass. And so I like that even though there are these very old and powerful beings or figures or forces within the world, you can't just take them at face value. It's something that has to be studied and understood, religion as much as anything. My second point of conversation is knowing your audience. This is a show that really knows your audience, and as a writer, you should really know your audience if you want them to get the right reaction out of what you're giving them. It's a show made for sci-fi fantasy nerds, and our lead character, Quentin, is a sci-fi fantasy nerd. He knows Fillory and Further back and forth, he knows the ins and outs of it, like I know the ins and outs of the Buffyverse, and so it makes for a very kind of unique viewing experience, because he is just like you and me. He would probably watch the show if he wasn't on it, you know what I mean? And just that element of the different factions of nerddom, we've got Alice, who is super nerdy, but she's very kind of serious about things, and she's very by the book, and that's one nerd. And then you've got the Quentin nerd, who's a super fanboy, and then you've got Julia, who is a nerd deep down, even though she was trying to cover it up with her adult ideas. And we've got Margot and Elliot, who we find out were nerdy kids. They did read the Fillory and Further books. And we've got Penny, who's not really a nerd, even though he's kind of the powerful, reluctant prodigy of the group. He's kind of too cool for school and feels that way and sees himself that way. But just The way that the show speaks to its audience and again kind of breaks that fourth wall and winks at us every now and then is really refreshing, and it adds a very special layer to the show. The idea of the class of 2016 that we get in the finale and how they were just as super fanboyed out about going to Fillory as Quentin and Julia end up being, it makes a lot of sense. It says so much about fandom and how big fandom is and how, like the Harry Potter books have affected all of us. And if somebody told you were going to Hogwarts, you would just flip your shit. And so I like the way that they brought in the class of 16 and made them as excited to go to Fillory as we end up being by the end of the season. And with the meta of the finale, with Quentin actually narrating to us by writing the 7th Fillory book, it's really fun. The whole narrative technique that they use in the final episode really is just a lot of fun, and it's something that I wish that they had done throughout the whole season, but I get why they saved it for the end. And yeah, Brandy and I were talking about how refreshing it is to see them swearing, because these are young adults and they are seeing some crazy shit, right? And they say crazy shit and they say, oh, somebody's fucking with time. And even though it's muted, it's there and you get the frustration of these characters. And since they are adults, it makes sense that they would use adult language because, hello, crazy shit. Alright, so next we're going to be talking about characters, so find me in part 2. Alright, so the characters in season 1 of The Magicians. Let's get this bitch out of the way. Okay, Alice. I don't think that she's necessarily miscast, but I really don't like the costume choices for the Alice character. I grew up with Willow Rosenberg, who is a nerd and very kind of meek and quiet, but at the same time spunky. I'm kind of spoiled by Willow because aside from like the pilot episode, the costume department doesn't go out of its way to dress Willow up as a nerd. Sure, she has this kind of like funky, nerdy style, but she's not like glasses and all this good stuff that they do to Alice. Alice just doesn't come across very genuinely. I do like the actress at points throughout the season, and I don't like the whole Quentin and Alice love pairing. I feel like Alice and Penny really worked better, but that's a different conversation. I feel like trying to dress this girl up as a nerd, but then still keeping her in these super short skirts and high socks, she looks like a librarian from a porno, and it's not cute. It's so dumb. Like, this girl is gorgeous. She's got nice breasts, she has great legs, she's tall, and she's blonde, and for you to just dress her up as a nerd, she seems like she's playing Halloween, and we really need to do something about Alice's costume in the next season. But as for Alice in general, I do like that she is very, like, stick-to-it personality. She's totally type A, and she has this bigger, like, family drama going on. She comes from a magical family, and she's basically spending the first few episodes of the season trying to figure out what happened to her brother with this whole class of 2016 thing. And all of the different family dynamics that we eventually get to with her make a lot of sense. Overall, I just don't like the Quentin and Alice pairing. The chemistry just isn't there for me, and it feels both too easy and at the same time just a waste of these actors because they don't really spark on screen for me. I really like Penny. Arjun Gupta adds a lot of spice and flair to Penny. He makes him likable and unlikable at the same time. He's just kind of a devil-may-care, and he's really reluctant to be a part of all of this magic. It's kind of traumatizing for him. He's had this like beast voice, turns out to be Martin. So crazy. It's really interesting to just watch his progression as a character from episode 1 to episode 13. By the time we get to the finale, he really is like totally gung-ho about making sure that Victoria is safe, and kind of sucks when she's like, peace out, Ho Scout. I really liked Penny throughout the season. Everything from him with the Traveler guy, who's played by the guy from Lost, can't remember his name right now, to just the finer points of having the like thing on the back of his neck to kind of keep the voices out. It was a lot of fun to watch Penny grow and kind of become a part of the team fully by the end. Except for your hands, like that shit was scary, like, and apparently like that happens in the books too. I haven't read the books, but yeah, Penny loses his hands in the books. I've got to read the books. We'll do that before season 2.
We will return for the second half of Days of Our Lives in just a moment.